It was the fall of 2011, and I just started my freshman year at a small college in Salem, Massachusetts. The town was alive with the spirit of Halloween pumpkins on every porch, fake cobwebs draping historic buildings, and the air thick with the scent of cinnamon and decaying leaves. I'd always loved the holiday, but being in the infamous witch trial town made it feel electric. Eager to fit in, I decided to hunt for a costume at a local thrift store called Forgotten Threads, tucked away on a narrow cobblestone side street shadowed by ancient oaks. The shop was dimly lit, crammed with dusty relics from bygone eras, and the owner, an elderly woman with piercing gray eyes, barely glanced up as I browsed. Rummaging through the racks, my fingers brushed against something unusual, a vintage witch costume, complete with a black lace bodice, flowing skirt, and a pointed hat adorned with faded silver embroidery. It looked authentic, like something from the 1800s, but carried a musty odor that clung to my skin, a mix of mothballs and something earthier, almost like wet soil after rain. The fabric felt heavier than it should, as if weighted down by invisible threads. I tried it on in the cramped changing room, the mirror fogging slightly from my breath. It fit perfectly, hugging my frame like it was made for me, but a shiver ran down my spine. The lace seemed to tighten just a fraction. That night, back in my cramped dorm room overlooking the foggy harbor, I hung the costume in my closet. The room was old, with creaking floorboards and walls that whispered when the wind picked up from the Atlantic. I couldn't shake the feeling that the costume was watching me from the shadows, its silver threads glinting faintly in the moonlight, filtering through cracked blinds. Sleep came uneasily, dreams filled with echoes of chants and flickering candlelight. Waking up, I noticed a faint scratch on my arm, like from lace edges, though I hadn't worn it since the store. Halloween approached, and the town buzzed with preparations, lanterns strung across streets, bonfires planned in the old commons. I was invited to a party at a historic mansion on the outskirts, hosted by some upperclassmen. Excited, I slipped into the costume that afternoon. The heaviness returned, pressing against my chest like a subtle embrace. In the mirror, my reflection looked off. My eyes seemed darker, my smile forced. Shaking it off as nerves, I headed out into the chilly evening, leaves crunching underfoot like brittle bones. At the party, the mansion was a labyrinth of dimly lit rooms, filled with the scent of spiced cider and wood smoke. Music pulsed, but as the night wore on, I felt disconnected. Friends complimented the costume, saying it looked so real, but their voices sounded distant. I caught myself speaking in an odd, archaic dialect, words like "thou" and "bewitched," slipping out unbidden. Staring into an ornate hallway mirror, my reflection blinked when I didn't. A cold dread settled in my gut. It felt like my body was moving on autopilot, limbs twitching subtly against my will. Excusing myself to the bathroom, I splashed water on my face, but the mirror there fogged unnaturally, revealing faint outlines like handprints from the inside. My hands trembled as I gripped the sink. It was as if something else was puppeteering me, whispering in my mind to let go. I stumbled back to the party, but the stares from others grew wary. They whispered I was in character too much. By midnight, the heaviness intensified, my skin prickling under the lace as if it were burrowing in. The walk home was a blur through Salem's fog-shrouded streets, street lamps casting elongated shadows that seemed to follow me. Every step felt labored, the skirt swishing like a living thing. Back in my dorm, I tore off the costume, my skin red and irritated where it had touched. Throwing it into the closet, I collapsed into bed. But sleep brought nightmares, visions of a 17th century woman in the same garb. Flames licking at her feet during a trial, her eyes locking onto mine with desperate hunger. Morning light pierced the blinds, but the room felt colder than usual. Rolling over, I glanced at the closet. The costume was gone. Panic surged. I searched frantically, under the bed, in drawers, but nothing. Approaching the mirror, my blood ran cold. Etched into the glass, as if by a fingernail, were the words, "I am free." The scratches were fresh, glass shards dusting the dresser below. My reflection stared back, but for a split second, it smirked independently. Shaken, I skipped classes and returned to forgotten threads. The owner, Mrs. Hargrove, eyed me suspiciously when I described the costume. "That old thing?" "From the Blackwood estate sale, descendants of one of the accused witches, they say. Odd family. Whispers of curses." She admitted it had been returned once before. The previous buyer claiming it moved on its own. As I left, the shop's bell tinkled ominously, and I felt eyes on my back from the empty windows. Back home, the unease escalated. Objects shifted slightly. Books opened to pages about the Salem trials, doors creaking open at night. I researched online in the college library, amid towering stacks that loomed like judges. Articles linked the Blackwood family to Abigail Blackwood, hanged in 1692, who cursed her accusers with eternal entrapment. That night, lying awake, I felt a phantom weight on my chest. Lace patterns appearing faintly on my skin like bruises. The scratches spread. Waking to find lace-like welts on my arms, I panicked. Mirrors in the dorm bathroom fogged with breaths not my own, revealing glimpses of a woman's face overlaying mine hollow eyes, period clothing. I avoided reflections, covering them with towels. But the whispers started, soft insistent voices urging me to wear it again. The room's temperature plummeted at dusk, frost forming inside despite the heater. Isolation set in. Friends distanced themselves after I ranted about possession. I visited a local historian in a cluttered office overlooking the Witch Museum. He showed me diaries from the Blackwood line, detailing a spirit bound to the costume, seeking a host to escape its purgatory. "It wears you, not the other way around," he warned. Leaving, the wind carried echoes of laughter, and shadows in alleys seemed to don pointed hats. Nights became torment. The costume reappeared in my closet, pristine, as if never worn. Trying to burn it in the sink, the flames licked but didn't consume. Instead, smoke formed shapes of writhing figures. My body rebelled, limbs jerking involuntarily, forcing me toward the fabric. Visions intensified. I was Abigail, feeling the noose tighten, vowing revenge through her descendants' heirlooms. The climax hit on a stormy Halloween night, thunder rumbling like accusations. Alone in the dorm, the power outage plunged everything into darkness. The costume levitated from the closet, wrapping around me against my will. I fought, screaming, but Abigail's spirit surged, my voice hers, body contorting. In the mirror's glow from lightning we merged. She whispered of freedom through my death. Desperate, I smashed the mirror, shards cutting deep, severing the connection. The costume crumpled, dissolving into ash as a wail echoed. I collapsed, bloodied, but free. Paramedics found me raving. They blamed a breakdown. The ash vanished by morning. Now, years later, in a bland apartment far from Salem, I shun mirrors and Halloween. But sometimes, lace patterns itch on my skin, and closets creak open at midnight. The costume that wore her, it waits for another. It was the fall of 2023, in a sleepy suburb of Salem, Massachusetts, famous for its witch trials. But now just a quaint town where autumn leaves painted the streets in fiery hues under perpetual gray skies. I'd moved there after losing my job in Boston, renting a modest colonial-style house on a cul-de-sac lined with ancient oaks that whispered secrets in the wind. Halloween was a big deal here. Porches glowed with carved pumpkins, and kids practiced their costumes weeks in advance. I wasn't much for the holiday, but to blend in, I stocked up on candy and set out a bowl on the porch. That first evening, as fog rolled in from the nearby marshes, a lone trick-or-treater appeared at dusk, a small figure in a tattered ghost costume, knocking softly. I opened the door, but no one was there. Just the empty street, leaves skittering like fleeing rats. Shrugging it off as a prank, I closed the door and settled in with a book. The house was old, with creaking, settling sounds that mimicked footsteps. Night deepened, and around midnight, another knock, faint, almost apologetic. Peering through the window, I saw nothing but the candy bowl, untouched, mist curling around the porch light like spectral fingers. The next morning, frost blanketed the lawn, turning the world crystalline and cold. I noticed a single candy wrapper on the steps, twisted, as if clutched tightly. Odd, since the bowl was still full. I tossed it away and went about my day, strolling through the town where Halloween decorations grew more elaborate. Fake graves in yards, cobwebs draping fences. Locals chatted about spirited nights, but their smiles seemed forced. That evening, as I prepared dinner, the knock returned, 2 raps clearer. The figure was back, shrouded in white, standing motionless at the end of the driveway. I called out, but it vanished into the fog before I reached the door. My heart quickened. Was it a neighbor's kid playing games? I left extra lights on, but sleep came uneasily, dreams filled with echoing knocks. Days blurred with routine. I worked freelance from home, the isolation amplifying every creak. The knocks persisted nightly, increasing in number, 3, then 4. Each time, the phantom trick-or-treater lingered longer, its costume dirtier, more ragged. I confided in a neighbor over coffee. She paled, muttering about echoes from the trials, but changed the subject quickly. One afternoon, rummaging in the attic for storage, I found old photo albums from the previous owners. Faded images showed Halloween parties, but one caught my eye, a child in a ghost costume, face obscured. Dated 1953. The caption, "Our little phantom." Gone too soon. A chill ran down my spine. Coincidence? The knocks evolved 5 now, accompanied by a childish giggle filtering through the door. I installed a doorbell camera, reviewing footage obsessively. It captured the figure approaching, but the video glitched at the knock, static erasing details. The air in the house grew stale, heavy with an unexplained sweetness, like rotting candy. Isolation bred paranoia. I avoided going out after dark, but the phantom appeared in glimpses, reflected in windows, a white blur in the periphery. 6 knocks shattered the silence one night, the door vibrating. I shouted for it to leave, but a whisper replied, "Trick or treat." My skin crawled. I barricaded myself in the bedroom. Research consumed me. At the local library, amid musty stacks, I uncovered articles about a 1950s tragedy. A boy drowned in the marshes during a Halloween dare. His body never found. Witnesses claimed seeing his ghost, knocking for candy he never got. The house I rented? His family's old home. The sweetness intensified, cloying and nauseating. 7 knocks, pounding now. The camera showed the figure closer, fabric translucent, revealing hints of decayed form beneath. I burned sage, but it only stirred the air, whispers multiplying. Smell. So good. Halloween neared. Decorations peaked, but dread coiled tighter. 8 knocks shook the walls, giggles turning to sobs. I found wet footprints inside small muddy, leading to the basement. There, amid cobwebs, a forgotten toy chest held a matching ghost costume, stained with marsh water. Panic set in. I planned to leave, but a storm hit, power flickering. 9 knocks amid thunder, the door splintering slightly. The phantom pressed against the window, face a hollow mask, eyes dark voids pleading or hungering. The climax came on Halloween night. 10 knocks exploded like gunshots. The door burst open. The phantom entered, gliding silently, reeking of decay. It cornered me, cold hands grasping, visions flooding. The boy's lonely death, eternal craving for treats denied. In terror, I offered the candy bowl. It shattered, but as I recited his name from the articles, a wail erupted. Flames ignited spontaneously from the old wiring, consuming the entity in purifying fire. I escaped as the house burned, firefighters attributing it to faulty electrics, but scars remain icy fingerprints on my arms. Now in a city apartment, I shun Halloween. Yet, last year, a faint knock at midnight, a candy wrapper on the sill. The phantom seeks new doors. Months later, the whispers return in dreams, urging me back to Salem. I've pieced together more. The boy wasn't alone. Others vanished similarly. The curse spreads through denial. I warn you, answer the knock, or become the treat. It was Halloween 2003 in the sleepy farming town of Eldridge Hollow, rural Vermont, where the fields stretched like endless graves under the bloated harvest moon. I was 17, part of a tight-knit group of teens, me, my best friend Mike, his girlfriend Lisa, and Sarah, the bold one who always pushed us into adventures. We'd heard the legends from old-timers at the general store, an abandoned barn on the outskirts, once used by settlers for some forgotten ritual to appease the land spirits for a good harvest. Under the blood-red moon, they said, offerings were made crops, animals, sometimes more. Intrigued and fueled by cheap beer and boredom, we decided to check it out that night. The air was crisp, laced with the scent of decaying leaves, as we hiked through the misty fields to the barn, its silhouette looming like a decayed tooth against the crimson sky. The barn was a relic, boards warped and gray, roof sagging under years of neglect. We pushed open the creaking door, flashlights cutting through the dust-choked air. Hay bales molded in corners, and rusted farm tools hung like forgotten tortures. The place felt wrong, immediately too quiet, the kind of silence that presses on your ears. Sarah laughed it off, calling us chickens as we explored deeper. That's when Mike spotted the symbols, strange carvings on the walls, spirals and runes that looked hand-etched, weathered but deliberate. Probably just kids messing around, I said, but my voice echoed unnaturally. As we poked around, Lisa tripped over something in the dirt floor, a rusted knife, half buried, its blade etched with more symbols. We joked about it being a sacrificial tool, but the humor fell flat in the heavy air. Sarah, ever the daredevil, brushed off the dirt and held it up, the moonlight glinting off its edge through a hole in the roof. Then she found the inscription on a rotting beam overhead, faded, words in what looked like Old English script. "Let's read it," she grinned, ignoring our protests. Her voice rang out, reciting the chant-like phrase, "Under the harvest's eye, offer the trade, lest the shadows claim the debt unpaid." The moment the words left her lips, the air shifted. It grew thicker, like breathing through wet cloth, and a low hum started, almost a chant, echoing from the walls or maybe the ground itself. We froze, flashlights flickering as if the batteries were dying. "What the hell was that?" Mike whispered. The temperature dropped, our breaths visible in the beam lights. Panic set in. Lisa grabbed my arm, her nails digging in. We bolted for the door, hearts pounding, but as we burst into the night, Sarah wasn't with us. We called her name into the fog-shrouded fields, but only the wind answered, carrying a faint, mocking echo of the chant. We searched frantically around the barn, our voices hoarse from shouting. The harvest moon hung low, casting everything in an unnatural crimson glow that made the shadows twist like living things. No sign of Sarah, just the knife, now lying on the threshold as if placed there deliberately. Mike suggested we go back inside, but the thought made my skin crawl. Instead, we ran to town, pounding on the sheriff's door at 2 a.m. He grumbled about pranks but promised to check in the morning. That night in my bed, I couldn't sleep. The chant replayed in my head, growing louder, as if whispered from under the floorboards. Dawn brought no relief. The sheriff found nothing, no footprints, no signs of struggle. "Probably holed up somewhere laughing," he said, but his eyes avoided the barn's symbols when we showed him. The town buzzed with old stories. Settlers in the 1800s performing rituals on Halloween, trading pieces of the soul for fertile soil. One tale spoke of a girl who vanished after invoking the words, returning changed, muttering about shadows demanding payment. We dismissed it, but as the day wore on, an unease settled over Eldridge Hollow, the animals restless, crops wilting prematurely under the sun. By evening, desperation mounted. We returned to the barn, armed with lanterns and crowbars, the air now thick with the smell of rot, like unearthed graves. Inside, the symbols seemed deeper, as if freshly carved. A whisper slithered through the rafters, our names, faint and taunting. Lisa screamed when she saw it. A fresh carving on the beam, Sarah's name intertwined with the runes. The chant grew audible, vibrating the floor. We fled again, but that night, dreams plagued me, shadowy figures circling under the moon, reaching with tendril-like arms. The second day without Sarah, the town felt cursed. Fog clung unnaturally, muffling sounds, and the harvest moon rose earlier, bloodier. Locals avoided us, crossing streets with muttered prayers. I researched at the library, yellowed books revealing the ritual's origins, a pact with the harvesters, entities from the land's dark underbelly, awakened by the inscription. Offerings weren't just crops, they demanded a life trade for abundance. One account described survivors marked, forever hearing the chants. My hands shook as I read. Outside, the wind howled like laughter. Night fell heavy. Alone in my room, I heard scratching at the window branches, but no trees nearby. Peering out, shadows danced in the yard, forming vague shapes under the moon. The chant echoed louder, pulling me toward the fields. I resisted, barricading myself, but sleep brought visions. Sarah in the barn, eyes hollow, whispering, "The trade is due." Waking sweat-soaked, I knew we had to act. On the third day, hope faded. The sheriff organized a search party, but they avoided the barn, citing bad ground. Mike, Lisa, and I went alone at twilight. The structure groaned like a living thing, doors ajar as if inviting. Inside, the air pulsed with the chant, symbols glowing faintly crimson. In the center, a circle of dirt churned like fresh soil, the knife embedded upright. As we approached, the ground trembled. Whispers intensified, one for the harvest. Panic surged as shadows detached from walls, coiling like smoke. Lisa bolted, but Mike froze, eyes glazing. I grabbed the knife, feeling a jolt like electricity, but alive with hunger. The chants roared, entities manifesting, amorphous forms with eyes like harvest moons, demanding the trade. Sarah's voice cut through, "Give them one, or they take all." The climax hit like a storm. The shadows lunged, tendrils wrapping Mike's legs, pulling him down. I swung the knife wildly, slicing through ethereal flesh that bled black ichor. The entities shrieked, the barn shaking violently. In desperation, I recited the inscription backward from a library note offering nothing but defiance. A vortex swirled, sucking shadows back into the ground. Sarah emerged from the chaos, collapsing as the ritual broke. We dragged Sarah out as the barn imploded, timbers cracking like bones, dust and fog swallowing it whole. She was alive but changed, eyes distant, muttering about shadows and trades. The sheriff called it a collapse from age. The town demolished the remnants. But on Halloween nights, under the harvest moon, chants echo in the fields, a reminder that some debts linger. Years later, in a city far from Vermont, I avoid harvest moons. Sarah never recovered fully, institutionalized, still whispering warnings. Mike and Lisa drifted, haunted. Me? I hear the chants in quiet moments, feel shadows watching. The ritual isn't gone, it's waiting for the next offering. Last Halloween, unpacking old boxes, I found the knife rusted, symbols pulsing faintly. I buried it deep, but the ground hummed. The harvesters are patient. Under the moon, they always collect.